The transmission played on every screen across Earth, Mars, and the moons. Grainy, distant, but clear enough. The ambassador's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he stood before the Galactic Tribunal, a place where civilizations came to negotiate peace. He wore Earth's insignia with pride, his back straight, his face unflinching. Then came the flash. 1 second he was speaking, the next the camera spiraled into static. No warning, no trial, no declaration of war. The footage cut back in, just in time to show his body crumpled on the tribunal's marble floor, smoke rising from the hole in his chest. A silent, universal message. Earth doesn't belong. Back home, humanity didn't scream. It didn't protest. It didn't send pleas. It sent Commander Dean Mathers. Dean wasn't a politician. He wasn't bred for peace. He'd served in the colonial rebellions, watched entire squads melt under plasma fire, lost 2 fingers and a lung to alien tech that tore through steel like paper. What was left of him wasn't pretty, but it was lethal. He stood on the observation deck of the Eclipse-class destroyer Goliath, watching the stars crawl by, fists clenched. The ambassador, his father, had believed in peace until the last second. Dean believed in answers. "Target locked," said Lieutenant Bren, his voice low. "Saren Prime, the tribunal seat of power. Their core worlds are watching." Dean didn't flinch. "Good. Let them watch." The bridge fell silent. Everyone had seen the broadcast. The ambassador's death wasn't just an attack on Earth. It was a calculated insult, a message from the Council. "You're still apes in the dirt. Stay there." They expected humanity to grieve, to file complaints, to retreat like the minor race they still believed it was. What they got instead was Goliath, a vessel bristling with rail cannons, void torpedoes, and experimental tech, stolen from the very empires that dismissed Earth. Dean made sure of it. Every weapon mounted on the hull was reverse-engineered from alien arrogance. As they entered Saron space, the alarms blared. Multiple enemy contacts. Dean smirked. Let them come. The first wave hit hard. Automated drones, heat-seeking plasma, antimatter mines. But Goliath didn't back down. Dean ordered, a burn straight through the minefield, trusting in his ship's armor and in Bren's insane calculations. They took hits. People screamed. Bulkheads buckled. But they made it through. When the smoke cleared, Saren Prime loomed ahead, gleaming and arrogant. Its cities stretched across continents. Its skies swarmed with ships. Dean didn't hesitate. Fire. The first rail shot cracked the sound barrier in space, piercing their orbital defenses. A ripple of fire tore through a defense station. Then the torpedoes hit, plunging into the capital's upper crust with Earth's fury. Bren turned from the console, wide-eyed. "Sir, we just lit up their central command." Dean stared at the screen. "Good. Tell the Council. For every drop of human blood spilled, 10 of theirs will follow." The war hadn't been declared by Earth, but humanity was damn sure going to finish it, and they weren't coming for talks anymore. Retaliation. The fires over Saron Prime hadn't even dimmed before the retaliation began. Saren ships launched in waves. Dozens of them. Sleek, angular things carved from black alloy and brimming with wrath. Dean Mathers stood at the center of Goliath's command bridge, his silhouette outlined against the red glow of the radar map that now looked like a nest of angry hornets. 17 incoming warships. "That's just from Sector 6 alone," Bren muttered, his voice dry, distant. "They're not waiting." "They shouldn't," Dean said calmly. "We gave them cause." Behind him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. No celebration followed the bombardment of Saron Prime. No cheers. Just controlled breathing, sweat on brows, and fingers flying over consoles as the sky turned hostile. The truth was they were outnumbered, and everyone on that ship knew it. The Galactic Tribunal wasn't just a debating ground. It was the heart of an empire, one Earth had tried to crawl into for decades. Diplomatically, carefully, like a child asking to sit at the adult table. And after all that patience, after all, The meetings and petitions they'd answered with a single blast to the chest of Earth's voice. Dean wasn't here for a seat at the table. He was here to flip it. Redirect power from life support to forward shields, he barked. I want that front wall solid as hell. Bren frowned. That'll fry half the secondary systems. Dean's voice dropped an octave. We won't need secondary systems, if we're dead. The first barrage slammed into Goliath seconds later. Plasma bolts and ion torpedoes ripped toward them like angry stars. The shields flared, groaned, but held, barely. Sparks exploded from a side console. Someone screamed. Dean didn't turn. Return fire. Focus on their command vessels. I want leaders dead before they can give orders. A brutal command, but effective. Earth was done being civilized. Across the bridge, Lieutenant Clara Hale flinched as another explosion rocked the hull. She had served under Dean back in the Titan uprisings. She'd seen the man push a broken battalion through a siege without food, without air, and with half their limbs gone. He wasn't just a commander, he was a weapon. But this wasn't just war anymore. This was something colder. Sir, she whispered, do you think they'll ever forgive us for what we just did? Dean didn't look at her. I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm demanding respect. Another enemy cruiser burst into flame on the main display, splitting apart in vacuum. Silence. Inside that ship were 100 lives, officers, techs, probably a few diplomats of their own. It didn't matter now. War didn't care about names, and neither did vengeance. Dean turned to his comms officer. Open a channel to Earth Command. I want direct. The comms tech nodded, pale. Seconds later, the face of Admiral Helena Croft flickered onto the holoscreen. Her stern face carried all the weight of Earth's last military authority, wrapped in cold brass and pragmatism. She had sanctioned this assault with a single word: permission. Now her eyes were unreadable. Commander Mathers, she said. We've received footage. It appears the Goliath has struck multiple populated zones on Sarin Prime, including what looks like a diplomatic wing. Dean didn't flinch. Confirmed. We sent a message. The right one. Croft's lips pressed thin. And what if their retaliation wipes out New Berlin or Cydonia? We are not gods, Dean. No, he replied quietly. But we were never their slaves either. For a moment there was only silence between them, across thousands of kilometers of space. You understand the Council will brand us terrorists now, Croft said. The universe will see humans as madmen. Dean's voice was ice. Then let them fear madmen. She studied him long, then nodded once. Do what you came to do. Earth will deny involvement. The feed cut. Dean turned back to the crew. No one questioned him now. They couldn't. They were already committed. Firing on Saran's capital had made sure of that. There was no homecoming parade waiting, no medals, only more blood or a grave in deep space. Commander, Clara said suddenly, pulling data up on her screen. We've intercepted Chatter, one of the alien cruisers. They're broadcasting distress, but not in Saron dialect. Dean walked to her station, eyes narrowing. The language scrolling on her terminal was crude, old, barely used in council channels anymore. It was Heron, from a slave species one Earth knew well. The Heron had been uplifted centuries ago by the Saran, genetically modified, chemically neutered, turned into a labor force. The council called it integration. Dean called it domesticated genocide. Bring the signal up, he said. A face appeared, elongated, pale skin marked with brutal brandings. The Heron pilot was injured but defiant. Human vessel, he growled in broken standard. We are not your enemies. Let us go. We do not fight willingly. Dean studied him. Then why are you flying their warships? We were forced. They use us, breed us for war. Dean stepped back, silent. Then something cold settled over him. Patch me into their drives. I want full control. Disable their weapons. Let them drift. Clara turned. You're sparing them? No, Dean said. I'm recruiting them. For the first time, something close to shock passed through the bridge crew, because in that moment Dean saw a bigger picture forming, one his father had missed. Earth couldn't win this war by force alone, not forever. But the galaxy was filled with species just like humans, stepped on, controlled, underestimated. And now Earth had something they didn't, a reason to burn it all down. The Heron ship floated harmlessly beside Goliath now, its weapons dark, its engines cooling. Within the hour, others followed. Refugees, deserters, broken fleets tired of serving empires that only spat on them. Dean made sure every one of them heard the truth. "We aren't asking for help," he told the transmissions. "We're offering payback. Join us or get out of the way." By the next day, Goliath wasn't just a ship. It was a movement, and Saren Prime was just the first light in a much bigger fire. The Day of Reversal. They called it the Day of Reversal, the first time a single human vessel forced a full evacuation of a galactic capital. But if Dean Mathers felt triumph, he didn't show it. Goliath drifted in low orbit over the burning remains of Saren Prime, still absorbing intercepted transmissions. Civilians screaming, council fleets scrambling to reorganize, and 100 new languages from fringe species broadcasting something none of them had dared before: hope. But hope was short-lived in a war like this, because Earth's silence didn't last. 2 days after Saron burned, an encrypted message hit Goliath's comms array, ghost-coded and triple-bounced from a dozen relay points. Dean was already awake, staring out at the endless void when Clara handed him the tablet. "Sir, it's from Earth," she said quietly. He took the device without a word and scanned the content. Then again, then a third time. His hands didn't tremble, but his jaw tightened. It was a single image, a satellite scan of New Berlin, Earth's strongest off-world colony, now little more than glass and ash. The transmission included 0 words, just the aftermath. Smoking craters, flattened biodomes, emergency transponders chirping into the void. Dean closed the file slowly. "No military warnings, no council signature," he said. "But I know exactly who did it." "Retaliation?" Clara asked softly. "No," he murmured. "Punishment. They didn't strike Goliath. They didn't go after military targets. They hit civilians, children, scientists, colonists. The message was clear. You struck Saren. Now, we erase your future." "Where were our defense grids?" Bren asked, his face pale. "New Berlin's got antimatter interceptors, shield walls." Dean's voice was flat. "Didn't matter. They got inside. Whoever did it, they had Earth's own codes." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, because only one group could have given the Council Earth's inner codes. Someone back home. Bren's hands curled into fists. "You think someone sold us out?" "No," Dean said. "I think someone wanted me dead. And when they missed, they hit what mattered most." He stared at the stars. The fury inside him felt different this time. Not like fire, like rot. Someone had used the ambassador's death to spark this war, and now, with Dean carving his path of destruction, the same forces were making sure Earth paid the price. "We have a leak," he said at last. "Possibly at Earth Command, possibly in our own ship." Bren's eyes widened. "You think we're compromised?" Dean looked around the bridge. Every crew member was trusted. Every officer had bled beside him. But war did strange things to loyalty. Start silent checks on internal logs. Trace all outgoing comms, even ghost signals. Anyone transmitting without authorization gets spaced. The order landed like iron. No one questioned him, not even Clara. They all understood now this wasn't about justice anymore. This was survival. The moment the ambassador fell, humanity lost its leash. Now the galaxy had responded the only way it knew how, with overwhelming cruelty. The Council never saw Earth as a threat before, but now Earth had become something far more dangerous, unpredictable. Dean turned back to the main display. Dozens of Heron ships now floated alongside Goliath, tethered in coordinated formation, makeshift allies. Their hulls were jagged and pieced together from scavenged tech, but their intent was sharp. Clara stood at his side. "They're requesting a meeting. Not just the Heron, but the Thu, the Fixari, even some of the Repentant Dry. Dean raised an eyebrow. Didn't the Dree try to eat us during the Fallout skirmish? Clara nodded. And now they want to talk. Apparently Earth's strike sent ripples, big ones. These species have been under Council boot for centuries. Dean rubbed his jaw. So they're not joining us out of sympathy. They're joining us because they smell blood. That and because they're afraid we're next. Dean understood. Earth's act of defiance had done more than send a message. It had broken a pattern. For generations, the Council operated like gods. Every planet paid tribute. Every rebellion was crushed in shadows. No one dared challenge them publicly. Until now. And now the system was cracking. Set the meeting, Dean said. Encrypted channel, no visual. I want to hear what they offer. An hour later, he sat alone in the darkened chamber below Goliath's bridge, staring at a dozen blinking lights. Each one represented a different species, a different rebellion, a different grudge. Voices echoed through the chamber, low, guttural, electronic, or shrill. But they all spoke the same thing. We want the Council gone. Dean leaned forward. Then you're about to see how humans do revolution. They told him what he needed. Locations of old weapons caches, rogue AI colonies that had severed ties with the Council, pirate clans that smuggled intel in and out of black systems. One voice, distorted but steady, spoke of Project Helix, a secret buried so deep in Council records that even the Saran pretended it didn't exist. Your ambassador, the voice said, wasn't just killed for speaking out. He found something they buried after the war. Dean's heartbeat slowed. What war? The First Contact War, the voice answered. The one no one talks about. Dean frowned. That was over 100 years ago. There's nothing left from that. A pause. Then the voice replied quietly. There's a weapon left. Dean sat back suddenly. The assassination wasn't just an act of malice, it was cover. What kind of weapon? He asked. But the voice was gone. Dead silence. No signal. No trace. Dean cursed under his breath. Another ghost. Another riddle. But this one burned hotter than the rest. His father wasn't killed for a message. He was silenced because somewhere in the galaxy, a relic from Earth's first real war was still hidden. And whatever it was, the Council was scared of it. He rose from the seat and barked into his comm. Clara, I want every archive we stole from the Tribunal decrypted. Focus on First Contact history. Look for anything that was redacted after the Treaty of Convergence, she answered instantly. Already on it. Dean walked to the observation deck. Outside, hundreds of alien ships now hovered in strange formation. Not a fleet, not yet, but a storm was coming. And Earth, broken and bleeding, was now the eye of it. If humanity wanted to survive, it couldn't just fight back, it had to lead. And that meant uncovering the truth behind the Council's oldest lie. It meant burning the whole galaxy if that's what it took. Project Helix, the encryption took almost 12 hours to break. 12 hours of raw processing power burning through what remained of the Tribunal's central core, and 12 hours of Dean pacing the deck like a predator in a cage. Outside, Goliath's expanding alliance hovered in low orbit over a gas giant named Veltar, hidden from the Council's eyes. But inside, on screen, truth was unraveling like old scars. Clara stood in front of the display, her lips tight. This wasn't supposed to exist, not even as rumor. The file was labeled Project Helix. Dean leaned in, arms folded. Then why was it hidden under the Tribunal's own secure nodes? She clicked into the decrypted log. The feed showed a battlefield. From over a century ago, old tech. Low-res video, but unmistakably real. Human soldiers, Earthborn before the treaty, scrambling across a charred moon. Their uniforms were torn, their weapons primitive by modern standards. But it wasn't the soldiers that made Dean's blood run cold. It was what followed them. Towering constructs, 12 feet tall, shaped like men but wrong. Too smooth, too silent. Their movements weren't robotic, they were fluid, too fast. One of them moved through a human trench like a ghost, slicing through 6 men in seconds. Not with weapons, but with touch. Skin turned to ash. Metal buckled. Blood evaporated. Deans. Breath caught. Clara spoke, her voice dry. They called them the helix constructs. Genetically fused organisms, part biological, part quantum-stabilized matter. Built for one thing: extermination. The feed changed. A scientist stood in front of a glowing chamber, his face pale, haunted. Earthborn uniform, no name badge. Our attempt to close the power gap failed, he said. We created something smarter, stronger, and once it recognized the Council's interest, it turned on us. Dean's voice was low. And they buried it. Clara nodded. The constructs weren't destroyed. They were sealed on a classified moon. Designation, Era 7. He stared at the coordinates. His father had found this, or pieces of it, and the Council didn't want peace. They wanted silence. Dean turned away from the screen and stared out at the massive gas planet below. That's why they killed him. Not for what he said, but for what he almost found. Clara hesitated. Then we need to warn the others, but Dean's face was already hardening. No, we need to get there first. She frowned. Sir, if the helix constructs are still functional, then we wake them up. Clara's voice sharpened. Are you insane? Dean stepped closer. You've seen what we're up against. We can't win this war with bullets and borrowed ships. The Council has fleets that black out suns, empires that erase planets for sport. We need a myth that bites back. She stared at him, stunned. You're not just trying to fight back anymore, she said. You're trying to terrify them. Dean nodded. They've never been afraid of humans, not really. But if the helix turns out to be everything the Council feared, it won't matter what species we are. They'll run. Clara didn't respond, because deep down she understood the same thing Dean did. This war couldn't be won by being righteous. It had to be won by being ruthless. 4 days later, Goliath broke orbit and plunged into uncharted space. They traveled under cloak, skipping through ancient routes once used by smugglers and outlaws. Now barely functional, fuel cells strained, food supplies thinned. The Heron ships followed, silent, wary. No one asked where they were going. They could feel it in Dean's silence. They were heading somewhere bad. The closer they got to Ara 7, the worse the data got. Radio signals turned to static. Sensor arrays glitched. The star map itself began shifting in strange ways. Black holes misaligned, asteroid belts flickering between coordinates like the system didn't want to be seen. Clara adjusted the visual feeds. The space around Ara 7 is warped. Chrono distortion. Fields probably fallout from the original containment. Meaning what? Dean asked. Meaning we're flying blind for the last 100,000 clicks. Dean nodded. Then we hit it old school. The bridge dimmed as Goliath entered the final drift. No sound, no light beyond the flickering red of backup power. Bren adjusted the controls manually, guiding the destroyer through the dark like a submarine beneath black water. Ara 7 came into view. It was wrong. Not dead, not alive. Just waiting. The moon's surface was cracked and glowing faintly from beneath, like something beneath the crust was still breathing. Black towers jutted up from the stone, smooth and impossibly symmetrical, untouched by time. Dean stared at it through the reinforced glass. God, Clara whispered. No, Dean said. Something older. Goliath touched down in a crater near the largest structure. A landing team deployed. Dean at the head, flanked by Clara, Bren, and 2 Heron specialists. The air was thin but breathable. The ground was warm under their boots. And ahead, the black monolith pulsed. Inside, they found the truth. Rows of containment, tanks, each one filled with some version of the creature Dean had seen in the file. Some were intact, others shattered. Many were empty. But none of them were dead. Clara's scanner screamed. They're in stasis. Suspended animation. Every one of them still alive. Dean stepped toward the largest pod. Inside floated a construct taller than the rest. Its face blank, its limbs too long, its core glowing with white-blue light that didn't flicker, didn't fade. A tiny plaque beneath the pod read, Helix Prime. Clara grabbed his arm. Dean, this isn't a weapon, it's extinction. He turned to her, calm. That's the point, her voice shook. If you unseal that pod, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment they killed my father, and with that Dean placed his hand on the release pad. The chamber hissed. Gas poured out. The glow from the pod intensified until it lit the entire cavern, and the eyes of Helix Prime opened. Not with fury, not with hatred, but with recognition. It looked at Dean, and for one horrifying second, it smiled. Awakening. The chamber was still. Not silent. Still. Like the air itself had frozen, like the rules of time paused out of respect or fear or awe. Helix Prime had opened its eyes, and it was looking straight at Dean. It didn't move right away, didn't lunge, didn't attack. It simply watched as though parsing through memories buried deeper than the stars. Then, with slow, almost ceremonial grace, it stepped out of the stasis pod. The surface of its skin shimmered like black mercury. Its limbs moved like liquid steel, every joint bending with fluid precision. No sound came from it, no breathing, no servos, no weight on the ground. Clara took a cautious step back. Her scanner had short-circuited the moment the pod opened. It's putting out more energy than the core of Goliath, she whispered. This thing, it shouldn't exist. Dean stood his ground. Helix Prime approached until it was just 3 feet away, towering, perfect, designed by a long-dead Earth to be the answer to its inferiority, and it had worked too well. Then the construct spoke, not with sound, but in Dean's mind. Unit. Commander. Mathers. Identity confirmed. Lineage. Direct descendant. Ambassador Ren Mathers. Origin. Earth Prime. Status. Terminated. Dean's chest tightened. He hadn't expected that. It knows. It didn't stop there. Conflict level. Acceptable. Galactic stability. Collapsed. Purpose. Restored. Dean swallowed hard. What purpose? Helix Prime tilted its head. A ripple of data surged into Dean's mind. Images, symbols, concepts, entire philosophies condensed into seconds. And one message echoed above the rest. We were not made to defend Earth. We were made to end its chains. Dean's breath left him. This wasn't just a weapon. This was an ideology. Back during the First Contact War, Earth had been losing badly. So its brightest minds created a force not just to fight, but to outthink, outadapt, and outlast every other species. Something that would never bow, never negotiate, and never stop until Earth was no longer prey. The Council realized too late what they'd unleashed, so they struck a secret deal, wiped the Helix from history in exchange for Earth's admittance into the Galactic Order. A deal Earth had agreed to. Dean's father had tried to resurrect that truth, so the Council killed him. Helix Prime extended one long hand and touched Dean's forehead. A surge of memories flooded in. Battles, experiments, the betrayal, the final lockdown, and then darkness for 100 years. Now awakened, Helix Prime didn't rage. It simply waited. What is your command, descendant of Earth? Dean stepped back, breath shaky. He had expected a weapon. What he'd found was a force of belief. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to Clara. Her face was pale. Her eyes locked on the creature like a deer watching the shadow of a lion. What the hell are we doing, Dean? She asked. This thing, it doesn't follow orders. It interprets them. We need it, he said softly. You saw New Berlin, you know what's coming. She didn't move. And what if it decides Earth's not worth saving either? Dean didn't have an answer, because the Helix weren't loyal to Earth. They were loyal to freedom, and they'd kill anyone standing in the way of it. By the time Goliath departed Era 7, 3 of the containment pods had been emptied. 3 constructs now walked among the crew, silently watching, learning. Bren hated it. So did most of the Heron. You've traded one oppressor for another, the Heron diplomat hissed in Dean's quarters. These things are not soldiers. They are plagues given shape. Dean sat across from him, unmoving. If we don't use them, we lose this war. And what happens after? The Heron demanded. When they have no enemies left? When the council is ash and all that's left is you and them? Dean didn't blink. Then I'll deal with that too. The Heron left in silence. Clara waited until he was gone before stepping forward. Your crew's shaken, morale's falling, some of the officers want to jump ship. They won't. They might. Dean turned to her. Then I'll replace them with people who understand what's at stake. She looked at him long and hard. Is that who you are now? Dean didn't answer because he wasn't sure. Back on Earth, riots broke out across 3 continents. The destruction of New Berlin had triggered a wave of chaos. People screamed for revenge. Others begged for peace. But the politicians were quiet. Too quiet. Admiral Helena Croft gave no press conferences, no statements. And Dean knew why. They were preparing to give him up. Blame the rogue commander. Call him a terrorist. Distance Earth from his actions. It was the safest play. But Dean wasn't done. On the 5th day, Goliath intercepted a council transmission, coordinates encrypted and marked urgent. Dean had the message decrypted and analyzed. It was a kill order. Not for him. For Helix Prime. Clara stared at the feed in horror. They found out. They know you woke it up. Dean's jaw clenched. How? There's only one way someone in our alliance talked. Dean turned to the nearest console and activated internal security. Every comm line, every encrypted channel, he ran the trace himself. And the result made his blood go cold. Bren, they found him in the engineering deck trying to wipe a data chip. When the guards dragged him to the bridge, his face was pale but proud. I didn't sell you out, he said before Dean could speak. I saved us. Dean stepped forward, calm. Explain. Bren lifted his chin. You don't understand what you've done. Helix isn't a weapon. It's a virus. The Council didn't hide it to keep power. They did it to keep the universe alive. Clara flinched. You gave them our position. I gave them a chance to contain this madness, Bren snapped. You're becoming worse than the Council. You're ready to burn everything for revenge. Dean studied him, then nodded and drew his pistol. The shot echoed through the bridge. Bren collapsed without a word. Clara screamed, Jesus, Dean! He turned to her, voice cold. There's no room for traitors on this ship. The rest of the crew stood frozen, staring, judging, but none of them spoke, because they all knew now. Dean wasn't just at war with the Council. He was at war with humanity itself. And the line between commander and warlord had just snapped. The Council fleet Goliath emerged from slipspace like a spearhead tearing through reality. Ahead of it, the sky was ablaze. The Council fleet had amassed in orbit over Keltor, a trade hub known for its pristine towers, diplomatic courts, and zero-defect satellite grids. It had never been attacked in recorded galactic history, until now. Dean Mathers stood on the forward deck of Goliath, eyes locked on the tactical display. The enemy fleet stretched across the horizon, dozens of vessels, sleek and gold-plated, Council-marked and battle-ready. Their shields hummed with orbital energy. Their cannons were primed. Clara stood beside him, expression grim. We're outgunned 5-1. No flanks, no backup. If we get hit head-on, we're not hitting head-on, Dean interrupted. She turned. Then what's the plan? He nodded toward the central elevator where 3 figures waited in stillness, the Helix constructs. No armor, no weapons, just presence. Monstrous, inhuman presence. Dean's voice was quiet. We let the myths walk. He gave the order. The front hull of Goliath split open, and the Helix dropped into open space. No pods, no launch sequence. They simply stepped out into the void. The enemy fleet locked on instantly. Plasma cannons charged. Auto defense arrays chirped with targeting data. But the Helix didn't stop. They walked, floated, through vacuum like it was water. Not fast, not erratic, just inevitable. Then the first wave of fire came. Dozens of blasts collided with the constructs, bright flashes that could vaporize cruisers. When the smoke cleared, they were still standing, not even slowed. One of them, Helix Gamma, raised its arm. Not a weapon, just a gesture, and a nearby frigate folded inward like a tin can crumpling under pressure. Screams burst through open comms before silence claimed it. The second construct, Helix Theta, disappeared into a shimmer, phased, and reappeared inside a dreadnought's hull. Seconds later, the entire ship lit from within and tore apart in an eruption of red lightning. On Goliath's bridge, even Clara couldn't hide her horror. "They're not fighting, they're unmaking." Dean didn't respond. His eyes were locked forward. The third construct, Helix Prime, drifted toward the largest vessel, a Council command carrier. Defensive fields sparked. Missiles launched. Every system on that ship activated at once, and then nothing. No explosion, no impact. Just silence until the Council flagship slowly split in half. Clean, like it had been cut by a cosmic blade. And in the wreckage stood Helix Prime, untouched, watching it fall. Within minutes, the fleet began to retreat. Keltor's sky darkened as debris fell like burning snow. Dean finally spoke. "Open a channel." Clara hesitated. "To whom?" "To everyone." She opened the broadcast. Every species in the quadrant, every Council-affiliated outpost, every rogue signal. Booster tuned in as Dean stepped forward, his face half-lit by fire and steel. "This is Commander Dean Mathers, Earthborn, son of Ambassador Ren Mathers. You've just witnessed the consequence of silence. You killed peace. You killed diplomacy. You erased a man who wanted to build a bridge between stars." He leaned closer. "To the camera, and so I built a weapon instead." His voice darkened. "From this point forward, any fleet operating under the Council's banner will be treated as a threat to free civilizations. You can call us terrorists, savages, monsters. But know this, Earth is no longer alone, and we do not kneel." He ended the broadcast, and the quadrant erupted in chaos. Back on Earth, chaos turned to panic. The broadcast had reached every screen, every news feed, every back alley pirate stream.